Hello everyone, welcome to Inconvenient Truths. I'm your host, Jennifer Zeng. Xi Jinping's personal dictatorship is currently facing an unprecedented comprehensive crisis, which is already a global consensus. However, faced with this crisis, what will he do? What impact will it have on the global situation? Perhaps this is the most important question. A recent article by Zhu Chenghu, a former Major General of the CCP's People's Liberation Army and a former Dean of the Institute of Defense Studies at the CCP's National Defense University, along with a CCP's internal document on conscription, should offer us some answers. First, let me lay out the conclusion. Launching a war against Taiwan is the core of Xi Jinping's basic national strategy. And this fundamental national strategy is hard to change because changing it would amount to political suicide for Xi Jinping. Now, let's talk about two pieces of internal information. The first is an abstract from an article written by Zhu Chenghu in 2023. I don't know if anyone still remembers Zhu Chenghu and an event in Hong Kong in 2005. Zhu told a Wall Street Journal reporter in the context of a Sino-US military conflict over Taiwan, quote, "If the Americans draw their missiles and precision-guided ammunition onto the target zone on China's territory, I think we will have to respond with nuclear weapons, and that we will prepare ourselves for the destruction of all of the cities east of Xi'an. Of course, the Americans will have to be prepared that hundreds of cities will be destroyed by the Chinese," unquote. Basically, he was declaring that the CCP wouldn't mind sacrificing all the Chinese population living in the cities east of Xi'an to destroy hundreds of or 200 of American cities. He also suggested that the CCP would use nuclear weapons even if it was just a conventional attack on a Chinese aircraft or warship from the US, something very likely if Washington honored its commitment to help defend Taiwan against an invasion by the CCP. At that time, Zhu Chenghu's statement shocked not only the world, but also the Chinese people, because as many as 800 million, or about 60% of the entire Chinese people, lived in the east of Xi'an. On the US side, the Congress called for Zhu to be fired from the National Defense University. However, a CCP spokesperson stated that the remarks were Zhu's personal opinion. It's worth noting that after making those shocking and anti-humanity remarks, Zhu Chenghu did not receive any punishment. On the contrary, his reputation within the CCP's military grew even bigger. In addition to serving as the deputy director of the Strategy Research Institute at the National Defense University, he also held positions such as the deputy chief of staff of the Guangzhou Military Region Air Force and director of the Strategy Research Department at the National Defense University, which are significant roles within the CCP military. This is a report from 2023, which shows he was invited to give a speech at the China University of Petroleum. He also frequently appears as a guest on various TV programs continuing to promote his hardline stance. Now, let's return to the abstract of his recent exposed paper. The title of the paper is, quote, "The Grand International Strategy of Chairman Xi Jinping," unquote. This paper has been designated as a reference material for teaching at the Institute of Defense Studies at the National Defense University. In this paper, Zhu Chenghu first criticizes the view represented by Liu Yazhou, the former political commissar of the National Defense University, that war against Taiwan is bound to fail. Zhu Chenghu claims that Xi Jinping, with his great talent and strategy, has already laid out an international grand strategy for the inevitable victory in the Taiwan Strait War. Zhu Chenghu believes that the strategic alliance between China and Russia, built on common national interests, is unbreakable. For this, Zhu coined a maxim: all things in the world can be broken, only interests remain unbroken. Zhu Chenghu also believes that the CCP's current nuclear warfare potential has surpassed the combined total of Britain and France, and when combined with Russia's nuclear capabilities, they are invincible worldwide. At the same time, the alliance between the CCP and Russia gives the CCP strategic backing in both energy and geopolitical terms. Zhu Chenghu argues that since the dissolution of the former Soviet Union, North Korea has had no choice but to become a strategic ally of China. North Korea's missile and nuclear capabilities, as well as its million-strong army with special forces at its core, will exert strong deterrence and restraint on the U.S., Japan, and the U.S.-South Korea alliances. Zhu Chenghu also believes that the CCP possesses the world's most efficient reserve mobilization capability, capable of rapidly mobilizing an army of 5 million if needed. With a continuous supply of reserve personnel backed by the invincible nuclear capabilities of the China-Russia alliance and the formidable conventional combat capabilities of the Chinese land, sea, and air forces, Zhu Chenghu argues that this would be sufficient to engage in a strategic showdown with the West across the Taiwan Strait. Zhu Chenghu particularly emphasizes that the international grand strategy diplomacy personally directed and deployed by Xi Jinping has established strategic alliances with Islamic countries like Iran, Afghanistan, and Pakistan, and strategic alliances with Islamic resistance forces opposing U.S. hegemony. Here, Zhu Chenghu's so-called Islamic resistance forces opposing U.S. hegemony actually refer to international terrorist forces. Zhu Chenghu believes that forming strategic alliances with these forces have given the CCP the capability to conduct strategically significant guerrilla warfare worldwide, even within the U.S. and Europe. The so-called guerrilla warfare mentioned by Zhu Chenghu actually refers to terrorist attacks. Speaking about the alliance between the CCP and the Islamic countries, I'd like to share a short video here. We all know that in July this year, Palestinian factions, including rivals Hamas and Fatah signed a landmark declaration in Beijing, and the CCP was very proud of this achievement. So this video shows that after the so-called Beijing Declaration was signed, representatives of Palestinian factions were taken to CCP leader Mao's former residence in Hunan province to pay respect to Mao and to learn from Mao Zedong's thought. This means that the alliance between the CCP and the Palestinian factions is not just on the surface level, but has reached the ideology field, which is the deepest level, according to me. Well, in his article, Zhu Chenghu also points out that with close economic ties as a foundation, Cambodia and Laos have formed an inseparable political blood connection with the CCP. Once a war against the Taiwan Strait breaks out, Cambodia and Laos will become strong strategic support points for the Chinese military to deploy and deter in the South China Sea and connect the strategic maritime areas of the Pacific and Indian Oceans. This article by Zhu Chenghu is said to be over 10,000 words long. The above is just an abstract revealed by former Peking University professor Yuan Hongbin. Yuan Hongbin believes that although this article is clearly designed to flatter Xi Jinping, it also clearly reflects Xi Jinping's strategic dynamics. Xi Jinping will not sit idly as an irresolvable, comprehensive crisis tightens its noose around his neck. On the contrary, he will inevitably resort to the adventure of war in an attempt to carve out a bloody path. For Xi Jinping, the real crisis lies not in the crisis itself, but in the fact that, according to his political logic, the comprehensive economic, political, and diplomatic crisis he faces is unsolvable. For the international community, the most lethal crisis is not Xi Jinping's will and strategy for global expansion through war adventures, but rather that the international community still lacks clear and accurate insight into Xi Jinping's war adventurism. Without such insight, it is difficult to prevent and defeat Xi Jinping's war adventures. Yuan Hongbin also disclosed another piece of information from within the CCP regime, stating that a notice from the Conscription Office of the CCP's Central Military Commission had been issued to various levels of the so-called People's Armed Departments responsible for conscription work about 10 days ago. The title of this notice is Key Points for Conscription Work in the Autumn and Winter Seasons of 2022 and 2025. This notice explicitly states that conscription work for the re-enlistment of retired personnel will be conducted in both 2022 and 2025. The focus of re-enlisting retired personnel includes various types of armored vehicle drivers, army aviation helicopter pilots, naval submarine technical personnel, surface ship radar operators, weapon operators, ship navigators, and various technical personnel from the Rocket Force and Air Force, among others. An insider from the CCP system who disclosed this information said he could already smell the stench of war. Xi Jinping's war adventure to launch a conflict across the Taiwan Strait could very well become a grim reality between 2025 and 2027. With the highest likelihood being after the autumn and winter conscription of 2025. Yuan Hongbin believes that although the CCP continuously makes some diplomatic feints pretending to show goodwill towards the West in an attempt to mask its evil alliance with Russia, North Korea, Iran, and international terrorist extreme forces to deceive the international community, various signs indicate that Xi Jinping has already raised the bloody flag of war adventure in his mind. Regrettably, some politicians who have significant political and military power today still fantasize about both competing with and cooperating with the CCP. Yuan Hongbin said this kind of thinking, where one wants to have it both ways, can only lead to foolish failure. Perhaps the United States needs to experience a failure and humiliation akin to the Pearl Harbor attack during World War II to truly wake up to the tyranny of the CCP. Hopefully, by then, the free world will not have lost the historic opportunity to defeat this tyranny. Do you think he makes a valid point? I checked and found that although the conscription notice mentioned by Yuan Hongbin hasn't been made public yet, earlier this year, the CCP held a conscription work conference in Beijing. The conference proposed conducting 2 conscription drives this year, focusing on university students, which means they are actively recruiting university graduates, including postgraduate students. The age limit for full-time postgraduate students, both graduates and current students, has been extended to 26 years old. You should know that this year, the number of university graduates in China reached 11.87 million, more than the entire population of countries like Belgium, Sweden, Portugal, Israel, Austria, and Switzerland. Finding a job has become a significant issue for university students. For instance, at the very prestigious Beihang University or Beijing University of Aeronautics and Astronautics, out of 222 undergraduate computer science graduates this year, 195 choose to continue with postgraduate studies, which is 87%. Of these 195 postgraduate students, some were directly admitted, some passed the entrance exams, and some went abroad for their studies, but we won't go into those details here. Of the remaining 29 who did not pursue further studies, 22 have not found jobs yet, while only 7 have. That means only 24% found jobs and 76% did not. However, if we consider those choosing postgraduate studies as also not finding jobs, since many indeed opt for further studies because they can't find employment. I remember when I graduated from Peking University, several classmates continued to doctoral studies because they couldn't find jobs but wanted to stay in Beijing. So if we count those who opted for postgraduate studies as unemployed, out of the 222 graduates, only 7 found jobs, which is a pitiful 3%. Note, these numbers are published by the university itself, since official statistics for the whole country are not released. We can only infer from this one example that this might reflect the real employment situation for Chinese university graduates today. In such a scenario, if the CCP aggressively recruits among university graduates, wouldn't it be easy to recruit many? Well, that's all for today. I hope you can like this video and subscribe for more. Please also visit my website at jenniferzengblog.com to sign up for a membership or make a donation. Your support helps me continue sharing the inconvenient truths. Thank you. See you next time.